if you think about research having different levels, you have that first level, which is just that we're curious human beings. And so we ask questions. So that's sort of the first level. And then as you get into more marketing research, you might formalize that, right? Through conversations with me or conversations with other researchers, coming up with more formal things that you ask more people, you collect those, you give a description of it, it's becoming slightly more formal. Then you might decide, you know what, I really want to know more about what's working or what's not working. And so you might take it to the next level where you hire a researcher. Now, a researcher could be hired just to design a survey, or a researcher could be hired to do multiple other things, like a peer review project. And that's sort of like you're starting to get into some serious, long-term research. And that's one of the things that people are surprised about research, I think. They're surprised how much time it takes. You heard Anna say they started in 2017, right? They're working on publications now. I'm relieved to hear her say that because I'm working on publications now too. So it gives me a sense of like, okay, this is normal. It takes time because there are lots of different steps to a peer review project, right? The first step is what would be called a literature review. And what that means is like, what do we already know about this topic, this population within the academic literature, right? So that might be the first step. Then the second step might be, okay, if we want it to be a peer review project where we're going to publish in a peer review paper, well, then we need to go to an ethics board and make sure the research project we're putting together is ethical, right? This doesn't have anything to do with the principles. This has to do with some shady stuff that's gone down in psychology over the years. And so the ethics board was created to protect human beings from shady shit, right? That's how that works. So that takes time too. You have meetings, deciding what you're going to ask, what are they going to be on the surveys. And then writing up and jumping through all the hoops of ethics, because you have to explain what you're doing. The ethics committee doesn't decide about your intervention or your research. They want to know if it's ethical. That's their job. So that process alone, sort of reviewing the literature, finding out about the population, that might take a couple months. Going to ethics board, putting that together, refining it, answering their questions, that might take a couple months, right? So you're already into 6 months right there. Now you get permission. Now you get to conduct the research that you've been working so hard on, right? And so now you got to go to those participants. And you heard Jacqueline talk about how she was in there and, it was a very dirty place and they've got candy, sweets, trying to get the guys to answer the questions. And, researchers think about those kinds of things too. One of the things we put into the Nottingham project we did with Jacqueline was a 3-pound note that everybody who participated in the research got as a phone credit, I think it was. That meant that people who were in the control group and never received the program did receive something for their time and effort, right? The other thing we did in Nottingham is we hired an on-site research supervisor. So she was completely separate from the program being offered. And so she could go in and say, I'm part of the research team. They didn't know her from the program. And she was, they knew that she was associated with Beyond Recovery, but she never taught the program. And so she could meet with them and answer their questions and be sort of an unbiased, independent observer. And then the last thing I'll say about that is then she was there for months and months, so she could collect interviews and she could do the things when people came in, ask them questions, when people leave, ask them questions. And so that allowed us to collect about 120 pre and post interviews before and after a 3-day program in Nottingham Prison. And then the end process of all of this research, right? That took a year. So then the end process is, we have to write this up. We have to analyze it. We have to use statistics on it. So you can imagine that most research projects like this, where you're collecting human data, take, a minimum of 3 to 5 years in order to go from sort of something descriptive to something, published.
I think it's so good to have this kind of transparent conversation about what it takes, because I think it can feel like, what are those people doing? But I do want to say a couple things on that, which I think is part of what we're excited about within innate health research. And one is there's a lot of kinds of research, as Jeanne Catherine said, but there's also a lot of interim lessons along the way in research. And typically in a university partnership, when that's the only partner, or when it's a really kind of established research firm, they have a lot happening, and their job is to be the gold standard of research in a way that sometimes does truthfully make it a little bit inaccessible to the field. You know, the sort of why we're doing this is all about reaching that gold standard and creating knowledge, and a little less about the continuous improvement that Jacqueline talked about, a little less about what is the interim report that might get into a superintendent's hand or into a commissioner's hand, you know, that we can share. What are the conferences where practitioners will get to hear about this work, even if it's preliminary, you know, findings where it can have a real impact in how they think about their work, or who they can tell that, you know, there's evidence out there. And there tends to be in those circles also a lot less attention to dissemination that isn't just about the academic journals. And so what we really started to see is that there is a space below the kind of top gold standard, which we still will aim for in some capacities, but there's a lot of work to be done a layer or two under that, where we're really meeting in the middle with the goals of practitioners and the goals of those who want to have more immediate impact with the process of research, although we'll still let that research point to the gold standard, you know, if that's making sense. And so that is the space we're trying to fill. And we've done it by finding and working with university partners. So they're getting what they need out of it, and they can focus their attention at the layers they want, but we can fill in and make sure that a year out there's a blog or a report or you know, or some conferences that we're talking about. And then as we continue to also write the articles that are going to take 3 to 5 years to get out there, and we very much don't see the only questions being yes no questions. In other words, another part of research and a lot of program evaluation, that is what gets funded in big research, essentially goes in with a yes no question. Did it work? You know, did it work? Did this work? And that's a good question, but there's a lot of questions before that or within that. How did it work? Who did it work? Were there some indicators that something was different, even if we can't nail it down, you know, to a particular outcome yet, because we're still waiting. And there's a lot of, again, interim ways of structuring research. So you look at the process of unfolding change, then just did it work? And so that again is a niche that we felt is missing and are hopeful to fill. So not at all to say the research isn't hard and long, and not to put, you know, any pressure on like Jeanne Catherine to get another article out faster than she is, but I do think we're looking at this in a different way, and intentionally so, and working with partners in universities to maintain the standards and the ethics, working with partners on the field who are going to push us to give answers faster. You know, we kind of want to live in that space a little bit.